Hello everyone, it's Carter from Coaster Explorers, and today I'm going to be talking about Goliath at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Goliath is a massive Giovanola hypercoaster that stands 235 feet tall and features a 255-foot drop. That means that this drop is technically closer to the minimum threshold of being a giga coaster than the minimum threshold of this being a hypercoaster. Now, do realize I am not saying that this is a giga coaster. Please understand that. I am not calling this a giga coaster. I'm just saying that the drop is 255 feet, which is closer to 300 than it is 200. That's just a cool little fun fact about this roller coaster for you. Also, since the drop is 20 feet larger than the height, that also means that there is a tunnel at the bottom of this drop, which is a very, very nice feature. But this roller coaster tends to get a lot of hate amongst enthusiasts, a lot of which calling it forceless, which I strongly disagree with that. A lot calling it boring. Guys, I do agree with that. I'm sorry. This roller coaster is one of the worst hypercoasters I've ever ridden in my entire life. And we're going to get more into that when I talk about this layout. But I really was going into this hoping that I would enjoy it and hoping that people were just underrating it and that it was actually going to be a fun ride. Because based on POVs, it looks like a fun ride. The drop is massive. There's so much speed. It's not what I was hoping it would be. Anyway, let's get in this layout. You start off by getting in this weird train. It's almost like if B&M and PTC went together and made their own train. I don't even know if that's a good comparison, but that's what it felt like. It has lap bars that are more similar to B&M, but the train layout is similar to PTC. How there's 3 in a row per car. So that's what it felt like to me. Anyway, you dispatch the station and you take a right turn into this massive 235-foot lift hill. And this thing really is massive. Like anywhere you look at it from the parking lot, it is just towering over everything except Superman. Superman dwarfs this thing. It looks great with Twisted Colossus winding around the structure and the supports. But I mean, this thing towers over Twisted Colossus, which that is another example of why stats don't mean anything. And how Goliath has all these really impressive stats that Twisted Colossus does not have. But Twisted Colossus is a much better roller coaster than this. Anyway, after this long, slow climbing lift hill, you reach the top. And this is usually the best part of the ride. Not in this case, unless you like going down very shallow drops. Because that's what this is. All that it does is you just feel like you're going down a slide at the park that just keeps going and you just gradually increase speed. It's honestly an embarrassment in terms of drops. It's a massive drop, but it's not a good drop. Twisted Colossus has a much better drop, and that's a lot less tall than this thing. Anyway, you fly through this underground tunnel, which this part's awesome. This actually is one of my favorite parts of the ride. The very bottom of the drop. You don't pull that many G-forces since the pull out is so shallow, but it's awesome just flying through that tunnel. Then you go up into this massive turnaround, and I mean massive. There is no reason this turnaround is this tall. You lose so much speed at the top of it, you get 0 airtime, and you just kind of just sit there. It's not like an overbank. You just kind of turn and then go back down. But this right here is actually my favorite sequence of the ride. You come down from this huge turnaround, and you're just picking up so much speed, and then you go over this, what looks like an airtime hill. I didn't get airtime, but the sensation of speed was fantastic. I sat in the front row both times I rode this because I rode the front row the first time, and Nolan rode in the back. And Nolan told me there was no reason to go sit in the back because he said it was terrible. So I decided to sit in the front for both of my rides. Anyway, the sensation of speed is fantastic. So much wind in your face. It made my eyes water. It was great. And then you go up into this absolutely horrendous mid-course brake run. And when I say you slam to a stop, I mean you slam. The whole structure like starts swaying. Like you can feel it. It does not make a good sound when you slam to a stop, and it is a really unfortunate feeling. Just about every enthusiast that you talk to will say that they wish that this wasn't here. And while I just talked horribly about what the sensation was coming to a stop, which it was a terrible sensation, I'm actually glad that it's here because of this next part. After you just start inching forward, step by step, baby steps, slowly, you start going down this windy mess of track and picking up all that speed you just lost. And then you come to one of the most intense moments I've ever experienced on a roller coaster, this insane helix. This right here is why I'm glad that it slows you down so much. I watched a POV of this ride when they were testing it from 2000, and you didn't fly through the mid-course, but you hardly slowed down at all. And there is no chance I would not have made it through this helix conscious if it was running like that. This is one of the hardest gray outs I've ever had in my life. I actually think this specific moment is more intense than Tatsu's pretzel loop. And if you watched my Tatsu review, you would have known that I talked about how intense that element was and how it's one of the most intense in the world. This one is right up there with it. This is every bit as intense as Tatsu's pretzel loop. And it's almost as intense as Intimidator 305's first turn. I mean, I could not see anything. Now, this might also be partly because the day that I was there and I rode this, it was 102 degrees outside and I was dehydrated. I know for a fact that played a role, but in terms of how strong my gray out was, and I was so dizzy coming out of that helix, I was seeing stars. Nolan was riding next to me on my second ride on it, and he was like, dude, I almost blacked out. And Nolan doesn't black out. Nolan rode Intimidator 305 18 times in one day, and he didn't black out, and he almost blacked out on this thing. Even Suede was starting to get fuzzy around this helix, even though he's nuts because he just doesn't gray out. He grays out on I-305 and pretzel loops, and that's about it. But he was getting fuzzy, so you know that's intense. After that, you have a couple lackluster turns, and then you slam into the brakes, and once again, it makes a terrible sound, and you feel the whole brake run shaking. I know it's supposed to do that. I don't know if it's supposed to sound like that, but it's definitely supposed to sway like that. The structure was built like that. I'm not questioning the structure of this roller coaster because I know that they knew what they were doing when they built this. So, what am I going to rank this Giovanola hypercoaster at this park that is stacked with 21 roller coasters at the time of this video? And, you know, if this was at any other park besides Magic Mountain, I feel like people would like it even more. But since it's at Magic Mountain and you've got literally like a top 11 at this park, it makes it really hard to like. So, based on my 2 rides on this ride, both of which in the front row, I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10. I like the speed. I like the way this roller coaster looks. I think it looks really awesome. It actually looks really intimidating, and I like the paint scheme. And they're actually giving it a repaint right now, as of the time that I'm recording this video, which is much needed because that thing was faded. It's super smooth. I didn't even touch on the smoothness, but it is so smooth. One of the smoothest coasters out there by far. It just has a lackluster drop. Some of the elements just don't make sense, and there's hardly any airtime, if any at all. Maybe there is in the back seat, but I didn't ride in the back. So that's what I think of Goliath. What did you think of Goliath? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, maybe subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.